Welcome to episode 1 of Coffee and Co-Read, your source for all things literary, with Kristen
and Catherine, where we believe there's nothing better than a hot coffee and an awesome book. Join us for our virtual book club where we take one book a month and dive into all the drama, adventure, and romance we can find.
So, hi Catherine, welcome to episode 1.
Hey Kristen!
So, I guess we should just give a little background about ourselves. Guys, thanks for tuning in and listening. So, Catherine and I met 15 years ago working at a coffee shop together. I was just fresh into university, and I guess you were just finishing high school.
Yeah, basically. Not to give away our ages or anything.
But we bonded over our love of coffee, which I still run on to this day, and books. For me, reading has just been something that I've always done. As long as I can remember, I've been a reader. So I remember being little and mom and dad telling me at the supper table to put my book away, to stop reading and eat. I liked it so much that I did an entire English degree about it just so that I could read and pick apart literature, just because it was something I like to do. So meeting you was awesome because I finally found someone who loved books as much as I did. And the same type of books too. Not even just books, but we have the same taste in books. And it was just great to have someone to talk to about everything. And somebody who wanted to sit through the Harry Potter movie marathon. And we literally drank an entire carafe, 30-cup pot of coffee to keep us awake, and going to see the Twilight movies in the theaters. And we kept running downstairs to fill up our coffees in between movies where we work. It was nice to have somebody that you could talk to about all the things you were thinking, who had then the same, who could respond in kind.
Yeah, for sure. I know you introduced me to so many series that I read, and normally it was through a terrible movie adaptation. I think one of the first ones was probably The Hunger Games. That one wasn't as terrible. The movie I actually really liked. But we went to see the movie in theaters, and then immediately afterwards I ran downstairs and bought the trilogy because I fell in love.
Mm-hmm.
City of Bones, the movie was not as good, but
No.
I hadn't read the book yet, so I didn't realize that. And then I read all the books, and I fell in love with that too. Vampire Academy, I mean, I kind of loved it. I still watch it as a guilty pleasure. That Rose and Dimitri, they both have my heart. But the books are obviously 100% better. And I probably would hated it if I had read the books first. I don't know. Maybe. I think we're all too hard on adaptations as a whole, but that's another podcast. And I remember you sent me Throne of Glass in an email, and it was all caps to read it immediately. I still have that email, and it's aggressive, to say the least. So I really have you to thank for a lot of the fandoms that I'm still into to this day.
Oh, thanks. It is a give and take, though.
Yeah, that's true.
You send me just as many things, and literally all of our gifts are here's books. We just give each other books.
Yeah, I read something and I'm like, holy shit, have you read this book?
So the first book, guys, that we're going to be talking about is Discovery of Witches. I don't even remember what I discovered first. I feel like I discovered the TV show and the book at the same time. And I saw a commercial for the TV show coming out and I was like, that looks good. And then when I looked it up, I was like, oh, it's a book. I'll read the book. And I read the book and then watched the show at the same time. So it was nice to sort of read them together almost.
Yeah.
And
yeah. I don't really remember if I finished the book before I started the series or what happened. I kind of feel like, was this one that we watched together during quarantine?
Yes, it was one of the ones. Yeah, it was one of the ones we watched during quarantine.
Yeah, so we kind of just watched it over Discord, I think it was, where you played it for me and I watched. I don't think I read the first book until after we had watched at least a few episodes.
Yeah.
I think that's how it happened. but yeah, so I really got into A Discovery of Witches then.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe partly because of quarantine, but also because it was something to do with somebody other than just quarantining with my cat all the time. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So guys, we are going to be doing a deep dive into Discovery of Witches. Just a heads up, we are not a spoiler-free zone. We are going to be talking the nitty-gritty of the book and going through it and talking about what we liked, what we didn't like. Just know it's all love. We love all the books that we're going to be talking about. We might critique them a little bit sometimes, or talk about an aspect that we didn't like, but on the whole, we love all the books that we're discussing. So it's all love. But yeah, so
definitely.
things are not spoiler free and they could get saucy.
The book we'll be starting this week is A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. Deborah Harkness is a professor of history at the University in Southern California. She has received Fulbright, Guggenheim, and National Humanities Center fellowships. She has many scholarly works and also writes an award-winning wine blog.
My kind of girl.
Right?
Loves the wine. So we're doing A Discovery of Witches, which is the first book in the All Souls trilogy, which is actually no longer a trilogy. So we've got Discovery of Witches first, Shadow of Night, and The Book of Life, which are all about Diana and Matthew, our two main characters. She's also got a fourth book out focusing on Marcus and Phoebe, who we will meet later. And she is currently working on a fifth and sixth book to add to that. We don't know what they are yet. So both of us have read the trilogy before. I have read it and seen seasons 1 and 2 of the show so far.
Same with me. We haven't watched the third one yet because we haven't been able to get together and watch it because of COVID and life.
And I don't know about you, I just prefer to binge it. So I rather wait till
Yeah.
it's all out and then binge it all at once so I don't have to wait for episodes to
Exactly.
come out, right?
Yeah.
So we've split the book into 4 parts to cover the whole month, and today we're going to be tackling part 1, which is chapters 1 to 11 inclusive. So we go from chapter 1 all the way through chapter 11 and we stop right before chapter 12. So we're just going to dive right in. The very opening page, it's like sort of almost looks like a dedication page, right? And it says, it begins with absence and desire. It begins with blood and fear. It begins with a discovery of witches. I don't know about you, but to me, this line is never explained. It
No.
never manifests and fully makes sense. It sort of confused me. I really like the book. Don't get me wrong. But
it doesn't have anything to do with anything. Well, I guess maybe we're missing something in the alchemy part, which we'll get to later because there's a lot of alchemy parts in this. But yeah, I feel like it doesn't really get into what that means. Like normally the name of the book has something to do with.
Yeah, and normally the little quote at the beginning, that little like almost dedication line, usually you figure it out later on.
Mhm.
And I just
Yeah.
feel like this one never really does. It's quite abstract.
Yeah. Also, A Discovery of Witches makes it seem like they're going to discover some witches, which they don't really. Like,
No.
she's always been a witch.
And she's always known that she's been a witch.
Yeah. So it's a bit of a weird title. And that first page is also a bit.
Yeah.
It's different.
Unless the only thing I can think of is like it's a discovery of witches, like a discovery to the audience reading. So we start off the book with our main character, Diana. She is sitting in the library with a book, and really in the first few pages, it's told that she's a witch. Like, it's just sort of dropped in there. Like, yeah, she's a witch. It's no big deal.
Yeah, it's a nice way to do it because normally it's like a secret or like they wait a while, but I do like how they kind of just throw that in right away so you're not wondering what's going on.
Yeah. And yeah, she's just working. I really actually enjoy her work ethic at the beginning. Like, she's in university, she's this accomplished professor, like she's at Oxford studying, and she's trying to be a professor there. Like, I like her success, I guess. Yeah.
She's doing well for herself.
Yes, she is. She's
She
doing well
is.
for herself. And like, she's just there doing her business. She's got like a little thing going, it seems, like a little flirtiness with the desk attendant who gets all of her books for her. Just like they've got a thing.
They've got some flirty eyes, and it
They
really seems
do.
to help her because she gets extra manuscripts when she shouldn't. So
Yeah.
it's cute. I like him. He comes up a few times, obviously, because she's in the library a few times, but he seems cute. I'd go there.
Yeah, Sean is his name.
Hmm.
And yeah, he does show up quite a bit, but like, as soon as obviously we spoke that Diana and Matthew are our main couple, Sean is obviously not
Yeah.
involved in that. So, when Matthew shows up, Sean sort of falls by the wayside.
Yeah, I think that he's always been, and I hate this term, but I'm going to use it, but I feel like he's always been in the friend zone. Like I
Mm,
feel like she's never, but he definitely has and had a crush on her. Like you can tell. But I do think that she friend zoned him, even though
it also would not be a surprise to me if she was just completely oblivious on purpose. Because
mm,
she seems like that type of character where she just gets absorbed in her books and her manuscripts and her work and her research and whatever it is she's doing. She's so absorbed in it that she literally cannot notice when a dude like is giving her the eye.
yeah, until it's somebody who's like super obvious.
Yep.
Which we'll see.
So yeah, so we've got our main character sitting in the library. She is, I say we as if we were all there. We were
We
not.
were. We were.
Oh god, wouldn't it be nice? But no, so we have the approach of a character, Jillian, who is not she's just not likable in the
Yeah.
book. And we are going to make references to the show. Can't help it. When there's a book and a show, you just naturally
Yeah.
compare them. Don't hate us. Um
Or
but
do, you know?
yeah, or do. Doesn't really matter. So, Jillian in the show, I find it's so much easier to not like her because she's not super likable, but it's easy to not hate her
It's
in the
easier to
show.
empathize with her in the show, I think.
Yes, and like
Yeah.
feel sorry for her.
Mhm.
Like she's just trying to like seems like she's just trying to make a friend and just trying to fit in and whatever.
Yeah.
The book Jillian is not nice.
No, she's too much.
She is too much. So she comes up to Diana and asks her to join the local coven and meet up with some of the other local witches. Um, Diana sort of is like making excuses, and Jillian's just not like. What does she do? She like gives her a stare down after, and like she's just not nice.
No, and it's clearly a conversation that they've had a bunch of times, and it's like, maybe just drop it for a bit. It'd be easy to just not talk about that for once. But I
Right?
guess
Yeah.
there's a holiday coming up, so a witches holiday. So they're all like getting together for that. But I feel like Jillian's even at this point, I feel like she's just a pawn for other people and she's trying to ensnare Diana because of who she is. And it would be a big get for any coven kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. So, Diana, sorry, comes from uh, this sort of influential witch family. Her last name is Bishop. They're known as being a powerful family. So, sort of everybody knows who her family is. They don't
Yeah.
necessarily know who she is,
Hmm.
but the Bishop witches are sort of a well-known family. So
Yeah.
yeah, I do see what you're saying there.
Yeah.
We also find out what her field of study is, which is the weirdest field of study on the face of the planet. I'm sorry if anybody is in this, but it's the history of science and alchemy. So, how alchemy, which is like the study of combining metals to make like the philosopher's stone or something, and turning how that became modern
Modern day.
science.
Yeah. Alchemy, by definition, is like was science of the time. But
Yeah,
yeah, it's very, like you said, it's very niche.
yeah, it's just so weird. And they do actually go into a lot of the detail on the science of it. And it sort of almost takes you out of the book sometimes.
Well, yeah, you can definitely tell that the author is a historian because of the details that she goes into with like references to people and references to like passages later on and stuff. And I'm like, I have no idea what she's talking about. I'm just gonna go to the next page to read about this relationship between two people because that's why I'm here.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, that is a good point. Like she did a lot of research, which
Wanted to put her research into a not practical, a fiction novel instead of, because she's obviously written a whole bunch of scholarly stuff. So she's trying to put something into a fictional world of types.
yeah, something more entertaining, I guess.
Yeah.
Um so yeah, so like we said, her family is quite prolific amongst witches. So we learn about her parents, um, Rebecca Bishop and Stephen Proctor.
And they're both witches. Well, witch and wizard, but they do call wizards witches, but they never call witches wizards. It's like a rectangle square thing. But they both of her parents are witches,
Yes,
which doesn't seem to be super common based on what most people were saying. Or like her mother is obviously a bishop. She was super powerful, and her father was also powerful. So I guess that part is even more uncommon to have two powerful witches together.
right. I just found that, and maybe this is just because I've done so much reading, but
Mm.
I just found that the author literally took like every single sort of scholarly trope and shoved it into this married couple.
Yeah.
Like, she spoke her mind, she was so bold, and he was formal and old-fashioned and wore elbow patches, and they were both so smart that they got into Harvard, and they both didn't have any money trouble because they could both pay for Harvard, and they
Hmm.
both happened to be witches, and they met at Harvard, and they fell in love, and it was just such a, like, typical tropey story. I'm here for it. But, like, I find it a running theme in
Yeah.
this book. It's
A
like
100%.
every single trope you can find in literature is in this book. It's like they're
Hmm.
all jam-packed in there.
Yeah, for sure. And like, I'm sure that if we read a separate book about the story about her parents, I'd be like so here for it, rooting for them. I'd be so happy for them. But like, just hearing it in a few paragraphs, you're like, this is too meet cute.
Yes, it's, like, too perfect.
Yeah.
And, like,
Which
again, we hear
they,
later on that they have issues, but
yeah. And like, she was so young, obviously, when she last saw them, that obviously she's going to evangelize them anyway.
yes, good
So
point. Yeah.
it's all her, I guess, what she remembers of them, really.
Mhm. Um, so we mentioned that her family is like a prolific witch family, the Bishops. So in the book, she is a descendant of Bridget Bishop, who was executed in Salem.
Yeah.
Is like the first witch executed in Salem or something.
Yeah. So I went down a bit of a rabbit hole just to look into it because that's what you do. Because
Why
Obviously,
not?
she's a historian, so I was like, what is the story with this Bridget Bishop? So she was the first person executed for witchcraft during the Salem trials, and it was in 1692.
Okay, so something we sort of passed along is that the most of the book, at least this part of the book, takes place in
Mhm.
England.
Yes. Yeah, she's in school, like Diana's in school in England, but she grew up in the US.
Yeah.
I think she might kind of get into how she was running away from magic and she kind of ran away from home to get away from it all. Um,
Right.
yeah. But yeah, so Bridget Bishop um, is apparently often confused with Sarah Bishop, which I thought was kind of a cool just nod because you'll hear later Sarah Bishop is Diana's aunt. So it was kind of cool that they talked about that. And I think that's probably why the author named her Sarah. Bridget Bishop wasn't even born a bishop, which is interesting. She was married at least 3 times, and her last marriage was to an Edward Bishop, who actually threw her under the bus figuratively and claimed that she praises the devil. So,
Oh, what a lovely man.
and then she has his name. So I'm not sure how much of real history the author is really putting into this because it kind of sounds like the female line of witches, that's the name that goes down. Like Diana's name is Diana Bishop, it's not Diana Proctor. So I kind of feel like using Bridget Bishop, they're kind of using an alternate reality maybe where her name was actually Bridget Bishop. That's my guess. I don't really know. But yeah, definitely interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what I learned on Bridget Bishop.
You really went down a rabbit hole.
I sure did.
So yeah, so we then learn that after we learn about her parents, she gives us a little aside in her brain. We learn that of course Diana has a lovely photogenic memory is what she says. That's why she's been so successful with her schooling, with her education. She was a really young like she made professor, she made like in was it
Tenure and
tenure really fast and like she's
published books and scholarly papers and such. Yeah.
yeah. So apparently she has a photogenic memory, but you had a good point.
Yeah. I wondered if this was magic too, because it seems like obviously later on we get into the fact that she's using a lot more magic than she says that she does. So I kind of wonder if her photogenic memory is actually just her recalling things using magic.
Yeah, that's a good point because as we will learn that she is very against magic usage in general. She doesn't want to use it. She doesn't want to be involved in it. She doesn't
Hmm.
want to be associated with it. She just wants to cut that out and not she doesn't like the fact that she's a witch.
Yeah.
She
Which I found like, I guess we'll get into this now because I found it really hard to relate to her at this point because I'm like, I can't imagine having magic and being so against using it that like you wouldn't just do all the little things that are so easy to do with magic. Like she talks about how her mother did the dishes and stuff. Like I'd 100% use my magic for the little things if I could.
yeah, I agree. Like if I could do the dishes with magic, yes, I would.
Oh my god, imagine how often are you cleaning your kitchen? Every day. So if you could just magic that, it would be so much easier.
Yeah. But like, yeah, she is sort of the opposite feeling is she wants to feel like she earned something. So she doesn't want to use magic.
Which I can respect that and I get it. She doesn't want to use it in her work, which I get what she's saying, but for the things that aren't part of her work, I would 100% not do that. But I do think that part of the issue that she has with magic is probably the fear and trauma from her parents dying.
Yeah, 100%. So we do learn that her parents died. It's like what, 8, 15 to 20 years ago in the book. Like they died when she was quite young.
Yeah. Yeah. I think she was 7, but I also don't remember how old she is right now. So,
Maybe mid-20s.
yeah, that sounds about right.
Okay, so I guess moving on. So I guess part of it, her issue with the magic is it's sort of just part of the reason, she's the child of two really powerful witches. So it's one of my favorite things that she actually talks about is when she was a teenager and, then into post-secondary school, she originally wanted to be an actress. So she was like going on stage and she was really good, but then she started embodying her characters. So like what she said, once she was Rapunzel and ended up having like a love affair with the guy who played the other romantic lead, and like her hair grew really really long because her magic was just coming out.
Yeah. She started embodying the characters. Yeah. And this, like, a lot of demons were attracted to her. And then obviously the humans that were caught in between, it always ended messy, it seemed like. So, yeah, I really loved that part too. I thought it was really interesting. And it kind of shows, I guess, an early glimpse of how magic is kind of like oozing out of her and in her life, even though she's really trying not to let it be. It's always a part of her life, it seems like.
Yeah. So she's still in the library at this point, and then she goes to get this book, right? And this is sort of where all the problems start. So she's in the library doing research for some sort of talk that she has to do, and she goes and gets this book from the call desk or whatever and brings it
From the
back to her
stacks.
station.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love looking through the stacks at
Yes.
universities. It's super fun. Um, but she goes to get the stacks, or she goes to get her books from the call desk, and
Mhm.
this manuscript, Ashmole 782, is like she says she can feel something from it,
Yeah.
right?
So she says that, like, I think when she describes it first, she can hear a whispering and she smells that it smells a bit weird and like there's all these different sensory things that she gets from it and she knows that there's something magical about it cuz when she hears the voice, she's like talking to Sean and she's like, "Did you hear that?" And he's like, "I have no idea what you're talking about." So she can tell early on that there's something magic about it, but she still doesn't want to use magic. So she's kind of in a conundrum of like, what do I do now? Do I look at the book because it does have something to do with what I'm studying? Or am I supposed to just ignore it because it has magic on it?
So yeah, so no, I totally agree. It's like if it were me, I would totally want to open the book and read it.
Yeah. I
But
would I would have kept the book. I would have taken the book. I would have put my hands all over the book. Like,
so yeah, no, I agree with you. I would totally also like have my hands all over the book. I would want to open it immediately, see what it says, see what it's in. I would totally keep it. I would be all over it. But
yeah.
her being so against anything magic
Mhm.
is like she just ignores it. She just pushes it to the side.
Yeah.
And it's just of course she's ignoring it. I feel like it's like your typical uh you know, I don't like it, so I'm just going to pretend it doesn't exist sort of scenario.
Yeah. And, like, part of it, I think, is a bit of a literary device of if she didn't ignore it and it didn't go back, then the rest of the story couldn't happen. So,
That's true. Yeah. No,
they
that's
need to
true.
make a good enough reason for her to put it back without keeping it.
Right. Um so we end there, and then we sort of get more into the, I guess, the world a little bit.
Mhm.
So they talk about how there's witches and mention that like when a witch is looking at her, she sort of feels like a tingle, right? She can
Yeah.
sense when another witch is looking at her. And then she also starts realizing that there are other creatures around. And that's what
Mhm.
they call all the different species put together, creatures.
Yeah.
And she mentions vampires are one of the other
Mhm.
creatures, and
Creatures.
their eyes are super cold, like it's like a cold feeling on her when they look at her. And demon eyes feel like a kiss, which
Which
is
I don't
bizarre.
understand. I don't like I was reading it again and I was just like trying to imagine what it would feel like.
Like,
Like
I wonder if it's sort of like a soft pressure, because really that's what a
mm,
kiss is, right?
yeah,
But like
maybe.
maybe it's like more intimate than that.
I
I don't know.
just like a kiss on your shoulder. I don't know. I guess yeah, soft pressure. But then what's different in a soft pressure than a tingle of a witch? It's I get that she's trying to make them sound different, but I guess I just can't really imagine what a kiss would feel like from a look.
Yeah, no, I get
But
it.
I do get that like she does say that it's unsettling, and I'm like, yeah, I can get why that would feel unsettling if it's feeling like someone's kissing you
Yeah.
and there's no one near you. So I'm like anytime that she's with somebody and they like kiss her neck, is she like, is that someone making out with me or is there a demon behind me? Because
Yeah. I also really I sort of appreciate her bringing this up because it sort of is useful then down the road for like the rest of the series and for everything is she can immediately tell
yeah,
when everything is like who she's around.
yeah.
So it's super helpful. So I really appreciate that she brought this up. It's different.
So it is, and I was kind of wondering, is that something that every witch can feel the different looks, or is that just something that she does? Because when she tells Matthew about it, he has no idea what she's talking about. And I feel like he's been around for long enough that if every witch had those same feelings, he would have heard about it.
Yeah, I think it is mentioned later on in the book that it's sort of another way that she is using magic without
Hmm.
knowing she's using magic.
Yeah,
So,
makes
but
sense.
still interesting.
Yeah,
So,
back to
we have
demons.
back to yeah, the demons and vampires. So we have our vampires, which is sort of like your okay, of course, they're vampires. They're
Hmm.
immortal, they survive on blood, your typical like scenario. And then we have demons. And I don't know why, but I sort of find the demons sort of lame in this. Like
Hmm.
just
Yeah.
coming from, like Supernatural and like literally every other series that involves demons. They're like these, like, sometimes they're half human, sometimes
Yeah.
they're all powerful, but like they usually have a really significant amount of power. The
Hmm.
demons in this book literally are just creative geniuses. They have
They're
high
like barely a step up from a human. Like it
yeah,
doesn't really, they can't do much.
no, they're really creative, so they tend to be have high IQs, they tend to be really artistically talented, so they tend
Hmm.
to end up being like famous painters or really rich investors because they're great with that sort of thing.
Whatever they put their mind on as their thing, they're kind of, yeah.
It's definitely an interesting take on it.
Hmm.
It just doesn't dive deep into it.
Yeah. And like you were saying, I don't really know why they name them demons because they're not, and not that all demons are evil, but generally demons are from hell.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is a weird name, I guess. I don't know what else you'd really name them to want a third creature species, but who knows?
Yeah.
I mean, they do naturally go with the vampires and the witches. I
Mhm.
see that, but like they're just not at all demonic in our normal sort of everyday what we would view them to be.
Yeah. And the ones we meet in this book, especially in the beginning, are like super chill.
Yeah, nice people.
Exactly. So,
Um, so the whole reason that she
mhm.
starts explaining this weird, like the weird feelings when other creatures look at her is because there is a vampire in the library.
Which this part was kind of funny because she's like going to get this book and she thinks that she hears someone and then she's like, "Oh, I must be imagining it." And then she does a bit of magic and then she's like, "Oh shit, someone saw me." And you're like, "You thought you heard someone. Why didn't you just not do the magic or go look around to see if someone was there?" Like
Yeah.
clearly you're I don't know. I was just like that seems like if you're only going to do magic 6 times a year, this seems like a dumb time to do it. This is not the right time to start doing your magic.
Yeah, so she does a little small bit of magic to try and reach a book that was like up on a higher shelf.
Mhm.
And then she feels a vampire watching her and what she like turns around and sees him.
Mhm.
And of course he happens to be so beautiful and he's got his broad shoulders with his slender narrow hips and his really muscular legs and he's super tall. And it's like of course he just has to be like of course the vampire has to be drop dead gorgeous. Like what other option is there, right?
There's none. It's always that. It's like main trope of vampire.
Yeah.
You I'd be more surprised if like a vampire I'd be more surprised if they had an ugly vampire in something than if they had a vampire that didn't drink blood. Like
Yeah. Right?
it's the main thing about vampires now is that they're beautiful.
Yeah. But I will say that this is sort of where we disagree
Yeah.
on because so in the TV series, Matthew Good, the actor, plays Matthew.
Which is convenient for him.
Yeah, it's easy to get his name right anyway. Um, but I don't, as much as I like him, and I do think he is an attractive man, I don't think that his physique fits as well the physique of Matthew in the book.
Mhm.
Like to me, show Matthew is sort of slender all around, tall and slim, which is
Yeah.
fine. It's a
Yeah.
completely fine way to be, but I don't know, just like book Matthew in my head is more like
Buff.
warrior esque,
Mhm.
right?
Which I kind of like I get what you're saying, obviously. I think that the show fits the description that I saw in my head of what he looks like when reading that. And like, I don't know, he's just never been super my type. So, and like you said, Matthew Good is obviously gorgeous, but he is scrawny. But I think he was pretty good.
Yeah, definitely.
Um, but after he sees her do the magic, she like gets a bit spooked because she knows that he's a vampire, and then she tries to kind of get away ish and has an obvious rom-com moment of falling into his arms, like in every Hallmark movie you've ever seen when she falls off the stairs and into his arms. And like I 100% would have just died right there. I would have been like, okay, I can't do this conversation anymore because I am too embarrassed. And I would have just left.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Um, but no, he introduces himself after that. He's perfectly polite. He compliments her on her work that was really boring, but he still read it. So yeah, it was nice. And they have
Yeah.
this perfectly normal meeting and
Yep.
then they just part ways.
hmm yeah. The writing in the book is definitely interesting because I think it's the first two chapters are in first person because they're Diana's chapters, and then you get to Matthew's chapter and it's in third person. So you don't get a look inside of his head as much as you'd think that you would reading one of his chapters.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. But yeah, I guess Diana then she fell asleep and then she phoned her aunt and then she fell asleep again. And that's when Matthew breaks into her room.
Not creepy at all.
No. Very, very Twilight. Like 100% Twilight. I was like, there's a few moments in this book that really bring me back to Twilight, and this was obviously one of them because he's just standing there, and at one point he's like, I'd been there for a few hours just standing still, and I'm like, how? I know you're a vampire, but
How do you
that's
let
excessive. Yeah. So he realizes that apparently around like 3, and then she wakes up at like 3:30 with the taste of cloves in her mouth, which
Ugh.
that saying gets shoved down our mouths a few times as well. So
Yeah. But yeah, he watches her sleep. Apparently, she lets some nice light and power escape while she's sleeping. So she doesn't even think she's using magic at all. But we're learning that it's coming out involuntarily.
it's
But I
seeping out
like
of her.
it. Yeah, I like it. But
Yeah.
yeah, he breaks into her house and watches her sleep.
Yeah, just go through her stuff. You don't need to stare at her. Like he's
Yeah.
obviously already has an attachment of some sort because he's not like he doesn't just go in and rifle through her stuff looking for the manuscript, which was his original plan. He's
Yeah.
in there and he's just watching her sleep and you're like, don't you have something better to do? What's even happening now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, we didn't even mention that, like, after she goes home, well, before she goes home from the library, this magic book, she does put it back, like she sends it back to
Oh,
the stacks,
yes.
right?
Yeah.
Because it's you can't take a library from the you can't take a book from the library. That's just you can't. Like
It's illegal.
she is a scholar. Like she would never.
Yeah.
So she goes back to the library the next day, and apparently the place is packed. And she's like, "Oh, what
Mhm.
else?" Like, even though it's not even class time, like the semester hasn't started yet, the place is absolutely packed. But I wonder what that's about. It's like,
Yeah.
come on, man! You find a magical book one day, and then the very next day, the place is packed full of not even just regular people. Like it's full of creatures. Like she
Yeah.
says, there are creatures everywhere.
Yeah.
So like. I don't know. I just feel like she's being a bit willfully ignorant, we'll say.
Definitely. I agree. Yeah, and I guess that's when she puts the book back, the library, she can feel it kind of constrict. And then she's like, "Oh, that's just normal. Let's go on with my day, I guess." It just
Yeah.
seems a bit dumb
Yeah,
at best.
agreed. We then meet Miriam, who is Matthew's right hand. So she's sent to sort of watch over Diana at the library while it's covered with creatures for some unknown reason. And so Miriam is there. Matthew's, I don't know if like she works for him, I guess, in the lab, but she's also a vampire. So she's there to like sort of guard her, but not like obviously. Like she's just sitting at another table, sort of just chilling out. And
Yeah.
then Jillian, we're back to Jillian. Second time we meet her, or she's mentioned in the book, and she's staring at Diana, and I quote, malevolently.
Yeah.
I
At
don't.
this point, like Diana hasn't done anything well other than the book. But like really, what has she done?
Yeah, but that's what I mean. There's nothing that she knows she's done.
Mhm.
All she did, take out a book, realize it looked a bit magicy, it felt magicy. She wasn't comfortable with it, so she put the book back.
Exactly.
She doesn't know the importance of it. No one's told her.
Mhm.
She also literally knows nothing about anything witchy because she chose not to know.
Mhm.
So it just bothers me that Jillian is being such a raging.
Bitch.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, so this part is like, then Miriam follows Diana to go to get
Lunch.
her lunch, which is just like, I don't know why Matthew at this point, before he leaves, like him and Miriam are at the table together, and then he's like, Miriam, you go with her for lunch. Like, why doesn't he just do it? Is he so busy? I don't really understand why he's pissing Miriam off so much. Like,
Yeah, because we should say Miriam is not happy about this
no,
at all. She's
she's
not
very
happy.
unhappy that she has to be there.
Yeah,
Um,
playing like guard to a
dog.
witch.
Exactly. Yeah, so Diana with Miriam trailing goes to get her lunch, and she gets a visit at the cafe from a demon named Agatha.
Agatha actually does give us a little bit more info on demons. So
Hmm.
they can just be born of humans. So like two humans can give birth to a demon. And she made it seem like a lot of them get abandoned for their, I guess, gifts. Like because they're
Hmm.
different, a lot of them end up abandoned. Um, and she says it makes it seem like she wants to know and that demons need to know what their place is in the world.
Yeah, yeah. It was definitely interesting because she does bring up a point out, like while she's talking to her, to say that demons used to be looked at as guardian angels and then gods. So it makes it seem like they're more than just genius humans. It makes it seem like there's more to them than we know, which we really don't know a lot. So that would make sense. Yeah, so she's talking to Agatha, and Agatha asks her to make a promise that she'll, if she gets the book back, that she'll share it with demons. And Diana is a bit weary about promising, and then she's just like, screw it, and says, yeah, I promise. And I'm like, it feels like she should have thought about that more because she has no idea what she's promising. Like, I
Yeah.
don't think it really comes back to bite her, but I probably
No.
would have been like,
But it's also because Agatha is a decent person.
exactly. It just seems like a lot to just promise a random stranger.
So yeah, so I guess she goes back. So she goes back to after lunch to her little area, and Matthew has shooed all the creatures away, so it's quiet again, which is nice.
Very sweet.
Very sweet. And the end of that chapter, we've got a little quote. It says, like referring to him, sort of, it's like a dark star guiding me home. So like she already feels this pull after like what, two conversations with him,
Yeah. 2
not
days.
even not even pleasant ones, like, you know
No,
what I
kind
mean?
of the opposite.
Yeah. So also feel like it goes without saying that in this world, none of the creatures inherently like each other.
Yes.
So, like, witches are not supposed to like vampires. Vampires are not supposed to like witches. They don't hang out. They're not friends. They
Yeah,
really
they all
dislike
have
each other.
their prejudices that are probably, I guess, learned, but against each other for
Yeah.
sure.
So, moving on, after she has her nice little, like, time at the library, she goes home, she goes to sleep, she wakes up. Then she goes rowing, and Matthew, like, essentially stalks her and where she's rowing and invites her to eat, which is nice.
Mhm. Yeah.
And she says yes, and he's pleased about it, and he looks all shy, and it's just weird. Like,
Yeah. I guess, and this is the first time that they talk about her walking with her eyes closed because he scares the shit out of her when he comes up to her
right.
after she went rowing. And he was like, I thought you could see me. And she was like, no, I was walking with my eyes closed. So, like, that's a
Obviously.
totally normal thing that a
Yeah.
person does.
Everybody does it.
Yeah. Yeah, they go out to breakfast.
Yeah, it's lovely. So he takes her in his super fancy car. He's opening her door, and then they get to this little like diner. I don't know, it's a British cafe, I suppose. They don't really have, I don't
Mhm.
know if they have diners.
Yeah.
And, obviously she can eat a whole bunch.
That's a I'm not like other women trope that she is throwing out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're at the diner, and then she starts asking some completely ridiculous questions, and he gets irrationally angry about it. And I feel like this is a theme, at least in this book. He gets flashes of angry a lot during this conversation, and she calls it frightening at one point. Um, he must chill out at some point because like if you're afraid of a person, how does a relationship develop? It just seems very intense, especially here. But part of it is her fault because she loves asking really stupid questions. Like
Yeah.
some of them are just ridiculous.
I think it's the historian, the historian in her. She's so
Mm,
like inquisitive about stuff. And obviously he's sort of naturally secretive because
yeah,
he's a vampire and he sort of has to keep secrets about his life. But I
yeah.
also feel like he's sort of, I find Matthew a really interesting character because he's almost like two completely different people. Like
Hmm.
we see this chivalrous knight in shining armor, like polite scholar, and then all of a sudden we see these like, I guess maybe the vampire part of him, like the anger, the possessiveness, the
Hmm.
sort of stalking part.
Yeah,
You know
and
what I
it
mean?
like flips on a dime,
Yeah,
basically, where
and
he is. Yeah.
and they don't really like meld together at all.
No. No, they don't. So, yeah, it's probably, like, part of his human life before and who he
Yeah,
was as a person and also matching that with his vampire.
yeah,
Yeah.
100%. But they do also take the time here to explain her subject matter a bit more, the whole
Mhm.
history of science and alchemy.
Yeah.
So she talks about it as history because history is sort of a logical beginning, middle, and end because it already happened.
Mhm.
And then the history of science and alchemy is to figure out how humans explain away a world with no magic because she doesn't want magic. She doesn't want to be involved in magic. So she's
Mhm.
trying to figure out how humans went from there is magic to no, there's not.
Yeah. So that she can figure out how to do that in her life.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, so they then go he invites her to go to a yoga class, which also just seems odd for his character.
Yeah, it's a very interesting choice of activity that they're just, like, both very into.
Yeah.
It just seemed like a lot of people do yoga for sure, but it just seemed, I don't know, out of nowhere. But yeah, I guess it's nice to see a man doing yoga because it's not really a common thing.
Yeah. But yeah, so it's nice we're seeing their relationship sort of develop. They went
Mhm.
for breakfast, now they're going to an evening yoga class. They drive out to like the country and they go to yoga class and I thought this was probably one of the funniest scenes in the story is so the yoga class was a special yoga with only creatures. So
Mhm.
there are witches, there are vampires, and there are demons all together. They're all doing um,
Yoga
they're
at the
all
same time.
doing yoga together and like the witches are like floating and doing swan dives in the
Mhm.
air and like the vampires are like being super fast and it's just cute to me. And the
Yeah, for sure.
demons are super slow. It's just hilarious.
Yeah. I also really appreciated when the teacher came over to Diana and was like, "This move isn't for you," because it definitely was a nice message, I guess, that not every move is for everybody and like that's okay. Just don't do this one kind of thing. So,
Yeah. And
yeah.
shows like the teacher feeding off of everyone else's feelings, which was nice. Anyway, it was
Yeah.
a nice scene.
It was, yeah.
She also learns like this big manor house where the yoga was put off was actually his home that he built like hundreds of years ago.
Yeah, of
Which,
course it is.
of course, he has this gigantic manor house that he like lets the yoga teacher stay at and like teach yoga in.
Yeah.
Anyway, and she says that she sort of understands him better after learning that that's his house.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And like he likes to be in the country because when he's staying near the school, he can hear the students all the time and there's too
Yeah.
much noise, which definitely makes sense if you can hear like a vampire.
Yes, for sure. We also hear about now his sister Louisa,
Mm-hmm.
who was apparently a big old B word,
Yep,
who ate
definitely.
people and owned slaves.
Sure, like the two no's in life, really.
Yeah, really, yeah.
Yep.
And she ended up being beheaded and chopped into tiny pieces.
Yeah. And Matthew said that she deserved it, which is like you gotta do a lot for your brother to
Yeah,
think that you deserve something like that. That seems intense
yeah,
for
agreed.
sure.
But it just sort of shows that like they're sort of becoming more comfortable with each other,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So they are drinking tea together when they're having this conversation, and she tells him like, don't bother faking it, like I know you don't like to drink the tea, you don't need to drink the tea.
Hmm.
And like a couple of days ago she didn't even want to like talk to him or look at him. Like when she fell into his arms and they had their little meet cute, she like
Yeah.
raced out of there, right?
Yeah. Which was literally like 2 days ago.
Yeah,
It's very developing very quickly, I guess.
yeah, it
And
this whole thing does develop very quickly.
well, yeah. It really does. Yeah. Um, and yeah, she also, I found it kind of interesting that she's very against magic and very against herself being a creature, but she's really into him already and she's not avoiding him like she is with her magic or with her being a witch, which she's avoiding that part of herself, but she isn't avoiding him, which is interesting for sure.
Yeah,
So,
because it's like a constant reminder that she isn't normal.
exactly. So you think that she'd want to avoid that too, but clearly there's a bigger draw there between the two characters.
Yeah. Although it does bother me that during this whole conversation he tells her like, "Oh, you can't avoid magic. Like you need to come to terms with your power and like you need to just accept it that it's part of you and blah blah blah." And it's like, "Bitch, you don't know her." You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like you've known her for 2 days. You have no idea like why she's pushing the magic
Hmm.
away or like
Anything.
anything about her really except for what he could find online.
Exactly.
So,
And
it,
that's a thing that does come up like in the first chapter, I think, is she talks about when she's trying to learn how to do magic, she's not good at it. And I think that's another reason why she doesn't do it is because she's not good at conventional magic. So she kind of, and she's used to being good at shit, obviously, because she went through school really fast. So like she's used to picking up things quickly and being good at it. And I think that's a reason why she doesn't like magic. Also the trauma of it too, because of her parents. But I think that those two things, like, you can't just tell somebody that they need to do magic and not know anything about them at all, other than that they
yes.
like yoga.
Right? Like he knows she's really smart, she rows and jogs and likes yoga.
Mhm.
Like so
That's
yeah.
not enough, sir. Yeah.
No, it is not.
So
Uh
after their tea, they go back to, he brings her back home, basically,
yeah.
and then he's out of there. He goes hunting. He goes to a hunting cabin with his friend who's a demon, which is definitely interesting that
Hamish.
it's yeah, it's definitely interesting that there's two creatures that are friends there. Because it's apparently taboo. But yeah, he goes to see Hamish and Hamish is a sweetheart. Although if I was Hamish's boyfriend, I would have been pissed.
Yes.
because
He
he drops
cancels.
everything.
Does, yeah. He canceled their lovely weekend to go
Mhm.
out to the cabin and hunt with Matthew, even though Hamish is obviously not going to be doing any hunting. Uh, but he knows that Matthew needs to do this, so literally drops everything, heads out to his hunting house out in the country, and
Mhm.
Matthew meets him there for the weekend. And of course, Matthew tells Hamish everything about Diana.
Like
He
pulling teeth, though. It's
right?
very slowly, yeah, but it does all come out.
But yeah, so he talks about like how she doesn't use magic and she doesn't like that she uses magic, and um he like doesn't understand her,
Yeah,
right?
which is definitely part of the appeal because he's very old and he's very used to a lot of people, so I'm sure he feels like he understands people easily because it's easy to know what people are normally. It's not normal that a witch doesn't want her magic. She's very different.
Yeah. Um he also goes hunting, but he doesn't actually eat. He just hunts a deer, like tracks it down until it submits, and then he just leaves it alone.
Yeah, it's interesting. And then he eats soup afterwards because that's what
Yeah,
vampires do,
and
which
they
is an
like it.
interesting take, I guess, that like I don't think I've read many books or heard many myths where vampires actually eat human food and can tolerate it.
Yeah. And I like that. It helps them blend in a bit more, right?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Um, we also finally, this is the point where we learn about this manuscript that Ashmole sent
Hmm.
me too, and why it's so important.
Yes, to Matthew specifically, because there's feels like to everybody there's a different reason why it's important, but he finally gets into what it means to him or what he thinks is in it,
Right.
which is
So
yeah.
he thinks it is a book explaining, like, sort of the origin of all creatures. Um,
Hmm.
I think the witches sort of think it's a book of
It's a
immortality.
grimoire.
Yeah, like a
Yeah.
spell book almost.
Hmm.
Um, but he wants it because he thinks it's a book explaining like how the creatures exist, like why they
Yeah.
exist, and that's why all the different creatures want it.
Yeah.
So they all want sort of their origin story. They want to know why they're there, which is a really like it's a very
Existential.
it's very it's a very existential reason to want a book. Like, well, we want to
Yeah.
understand why we're all here. It's like if I heard that there was a book explaining the meaning of life, I honestly wouldn't go searching for it. It wouldn't
Mm-mm.
be top of my list.
No, for sure.
But I mean, again, that's just me.
Yeah.
Um, Matthew admits too that he's craving Diana, and like craving. Does he want to eat her? Like, does he want to like do it? Like, what is the what's the crave here? He never says what the crave is.
No, no. Like they kind of get into the conversation a bit more about Hamish starts thinking that, oh, he feels like they're like mating, possibly, which is an interesting take.
But like, we don't even know if mates are a thing in the book either.
Exactly. And I don't know if it means like mating, like you're one mate that you only get once in a lifetime, or if it means that they're just,
Another word for person,
yeah,
like for your person.
exactly. Your
But
partner.
yeah, yeah. But he doesn't want to get too close because in his we learn down the line that he is 1,500 years old. Uh, he killed two women,
Yes.
and he confesses that he's very upset about it.
Yeah. And
And
Hamish is like shook for a second too. Like he's very supportive and he's very like I'm always going to love you, Matthew, but he's also like I can't believe you never told me about this and it just seems like he's very old. Two people is not a lot. And one of them he didn't even kill. He brought her back as a vampire. She killed herself
Yeah.
because she didn't want to be a vampire. So like, yeah, it is his fault. He should have a bit of guilt. But we learn later that like he decides that some people should die because they're criminals. So these two women he takes really hard.
Yeah. And again, not saying that he shouldn't feel bad. I'm not a crazy person. I'm not like throwing two lives away. I am because it's fictional. But
Yes.
in the grand scheme of 1500 years, he's only killed two people that he's genuinely loved. In all fairness, I
Well,
would say that's not bad.
yeah, and the second woman I don't think he really loved. He just kind of had an obsession with her and then followed her home and accidentally
Got,
drank too much blood, turned her into a vampire, she killed herself.
yeah,
So,
got carried away. Yeah.
yeah, that wasn't love. I can see why he's worried 100%. Like, if you do it once, I can see why he's worried that he might kill Diana, for sure.
Yeah.
But I don't see why he's so repentant of what he did in his, I don't know. It just seems like a long life to live to feel bad for all of it.
Yeah, agreed. Like, let it go. If it's been over 100 years, I think you should be able to like drop it.
Yeah, exactly.
And he confesses his love out loud.
He kind of like, I think he goes around it. He kind of basically says that he loves her, though. Yeah, it's very wild. It's a wild ride they've been on of less than a week.
3 days in, oh, we're in love. Oh, well, on his end, I'm in love with her. Like,
Yeah, and he's like very old, so you'd think that he'd be even less into declaring feelings at this point than a
yeah,
mortal would be, because a mortal only lives so long. But yeah,
agreed.
for sure. So we go.
And then we move on, and then we're on Diana's side again. So we go from
Mhm.
Matthew to Diana, and we finally get like a decent look into her relationship with her aunt Sarah, who, as much as I love as a character, she is like pushy as heck.
Yeah,
And maybe that's a job for, her de facto parent, like the person that raised her. But I don't
but
know.
she's like in her 20s. She's like a professor. She shouldn't need somebody being this extra and pushy about everything.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Like she gets really mad. Like Diana finally tells her about the whole manuscript problem because
Mhm.
so Emily is Sarah's wife. Emily has like sort of a gift of seeing, so she can sort of tell when Diana is upset or when something is wrong, when she's in danger. So Sarah always calls her whenever Emily has weird visions or something. So they
Yeah.
called her up. What's going on? We keep seeing you with this vampire. You need to stay away. And then Diana has to sort of say, oh, well, actually, he's sort of protecting me from all these other creatures. And they're like, well, why do you need protecting from all the other creatures? Oh, well, I kind of found a magic book. And then I put it, I sort of put it back in the stacks. And Sarah, like, flips her lid. It's like,
Yeah.
I thought we taught you, don't put a magical artifact back like that until you figure out what it is and what it does.
Mhm. Yeah.
But I just like, you're preaching to a person in their mid 20s. You also know them. Like, why would you? I don't know. I just feel like if she knows her, she's known her since she was obviously born and a small child and raised
Mhm.
her. Wouldn't she know that that's not the best route?
Tactic. Yeah.
Yes, to take.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? Because Diana gets pissed.
Yeah, which
Right?
like you would. You feel like an adult and then an adult's
Right.
yelling at you.
Yeah.
Like I get it, but still, yeah, it's
Yeah.
maybe not the best route, but I get what they're saying. And I think it's also because you needed somebody in the book to say, hey, this was really dumb. Why did you do that?
Yeah.
So
Why would
it
you
makes
put them?
Sarah seem like a bad person. Not a bad person, but just
Yeah.
pushy.
And I will say they did a really good job doing show Sarah. Like show Sarah
Hmm.
they do an awesome job. She is the same. She's super pushy.
Hmm.
She's always yelling in a good way.
Yeah.
So I
No, I
really
agree.
liked. Anyway, so their conversation's over. She says she's gonna deal with it. It's over. It's done. Like leave
Hmm.
me alone, sort of thing. Next day is probably one of my favorite scenes. So it's in chapter 10. Um, Diana is studying in the library again and notices that the lower area is packed full of creatures. So she goes to Peter Knox, which is sort of like a head witch, warlock, wizard, I don't know,
Yeah.
dude that she has met and says, dude, like, I don't have the book that everybody wants me to have. So tell all the witches to like shove off.
Yeah.
And then she goes to the vampire like people.
One of the sisters.
Yeah, what that she's noticed. She's noticed like some vampire girls there all the time. She noticed them and went to them and said, "Hey, we're starting to draw a crowd. It's starting to like we're starting to be noticed by the humans because there's so many of us around. So
Hmm.
like shove off. Like I don't have the book. Go
Yeah,
away." And then
exactly.
there's a demon that's been hanging around that loves lattes and he's like conked out of it all the time. She goes to him and says, "Dude, I don't have it. Like I don't have the manuscript. Shove off. Tell everybody to clear out." And I love it because it's like she sees a problem and she solves it. So she sees this issue of all these creatures milling about. They're going to draw attention from the humans and they can't risk drawing attention.
Yeah.
So she tries to solve the issue herself.
Yeah. Yeah,
And I
definitely
like that.
appreciate that. Yeah, I appreciate that too. I think it's a good look on her.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
But then we come up and she's in the friggin' library, and Jillian, a third time now, comes up to her. We haven't seen one nice Jillian scene the whole book. She's
Yeah.
super snotty.
She's like straight up a bitch in this one though. Like this one goes a bit too far in my opinion. Like Jillian talking to her and she's like, your parents are dead because they were rude and standoffish. And she's like, Diana's like, what does that have to do with anything?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just so far past anything that a person would say to another person. I feel like it just is so wild that she actually says this kind of stuff to her.
Yeah. It's like, what I don't understand is or not that I don't understand, but so she comes up and she's like, "Oh, your parents were rude. They didn't want to be in our coven either, but they sure learned." And like, this is sort of where we get our backstory of what happened to her parents. So
Hmm.
they were killed in Africa by humans, apparently after being discovered as witches. But then, so that's what Diana has assumed her whole life, that
Yeah.
her parents went to Africa on a business trip, were found out by humans, and they were murdered
Yeah.
by. And Jillian responds with, "Oh no, it wasn't the humans. It was witches that killed your parents." And like, it's just something I don't understand. You want something from this person, a book
Yeah.
that no one else has been able to find, that no one else can seem to get, that she is the only one who has seen and felt.
Hmm.
And that's how you think you're going to get it?
Yeah. It's wild.
It's
It
like,
doesn't make any sense.
to be nice. Try
Yeah.
like try being a friend. Like they're sort of it feels like they're like pushing Diana to Matthew almost,
Yeah.
right? Like
Oh, exactly. Yeah.
he's the only one who's been nice to her and actually like being a friend. Like
Hmm.
what do they think is going to happen?
Yeah. It's really kind of wild. So she hightails it out of there because she's like very triggered by talk about her parents, which makes sense. It's a traumatizing thing that she went through as a kid. So she leaves immediately and she ends up back at her room and she has a letter from the dean, from somebody. I don't.
Yes, I think it's the dean or the vice dean inviting her to like a tea or some weird
Have a drink.
something.
Yeah.
So she feels like she can't refuse.
Yeah. And she's very grateful that they've let her into
Yeah.
the university to study what she's studying and stuff. So she pulls it together and she goes.
And who is there but Peter Knox?
Of course. He's just
So,
everywhere nowadays.
yeah. So again, Peter Knox was in the library hanging out. He did approach Diana once before, but it was sort of like a really minor event.
Hmm.
And now he's spelled the dean to like leave the room and not come back until they finish having their private conversation. And
Yeah.
he's just not a nice person. So like we have Jillian being a jerk and she's a
Hmm.
witch. Then we have Peter Knox here calling Matthew that creature and suggesting that like she's essentially disrespecting her family just by being in Matthew's presence,
Yeah.
right? He's just like, again, I don't understand how you can think that this is the appropriate way to get something from somebody.
Yeah. And it's not even like, I know that at some points they're kind of trying to intimidate her, but that's not even what it really feels like anymore. It just feels like they're just being nasty,
Yes.
which, like, I don't know. It's like they've never, I feel like Peter Knox has never met a witch that hasn't been all about him, basically. Like he just feels like every witch should want to do what all witches want to do. And Diana's this anomaly because she doesn't want to be a witch and she doesn't want to hate all the other creatures. And this is a new thing for him. So I think he just doesn't really understand the situation, but it really doesn't make sense that they're all just being idiots about it, really.
Yeah. But yeah, so she obviously responds sort of in kind, like she's not nice to him back. She tells him
Mm-hmm.
like, dude, I told you before I don't have the book and, you're being a jerk essentially, and tells him like
Yeah.
he's being a bigot and a jerk. And she
Mm-hmm.
leaves the meeting. And then the next day, of course, she goes back to the library again.
Mm-hmm.
And Matthew is there again.
Well, yeah, she calls him after the meeting with Knox because she's like, he's getting in her head and stuff. And she's like, he is intimidating, he's threatening her. So she calls Matthew and leaves a message because he doesn't answer. So then he does show up the next day.
Right, because he was out hunting.
Yes.
And then he comes back and he's hecka mad.
Yeah.
Which is sort of like, it's one of those things where I like that he like comes back and he's mad and he's ready to avenge her. It's like sort of cute that way, but it's also like sort of a foreshadow of how
Possessive.
overly
Yeah.
protective and possessive he is. It's like it's literally been like 4 or 5 days and
And two of them he was gone.
yeah, and they're already like he's already like storming into the library because somebody hurt her feelings.
Yes.
It's just, you know, is just funny, but at the same time, it pulls at me that like romantic side, but then that feminist side is like, oh no, you don't. Like she can
Like
handle herself.
if it actually happened in real life, you'd be like, I just wanted a text back, sir. I didn't need you to come storming into the library. Thanks, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
So they go to yoga again after that. And when she leaves yoga, she feels like there's an owl about to attack her.
which is just weird.
Yeah, it's a bit of an odd thing to attack somebody. It's daytime.
And
too.
again, we never hear from this owl again. It's not a threat.
No, it's not. But it's like her last straw, and then she like starts to have a panic attack for reals in the backseat of the car. And he helps her through it, basically, even though it's kind of interesting that her big thing is that she has panic attacks when she doesn't work out enough. She just finishes a workout and then has a panic attack. I'm like, this seems like some mixed messaging here, but I guess.
Would you call yoga a workout?
Yeah, not really.
Like
it's more relaxing.
It's very gentle exercise, right? So
yeah.
So it turns out she mentions that she has an excess of adrenaline.
That's the first time that she talks to him about it.
Right.
Yeah.
So the doctors say, well, you need to work out lots to get rid of that excess adrenaline. So that's why she goes rowing every morning or jogging or whatever it is she does.
Yeah.
And then I guess she appreciates him like helping her out because she invites him to dinner.
Yeah. That's where the chapter 11 ends, with her asking him on a dinner date, and which is kind of funny because I don't know if she knows much about vampires, but I would just assume that they didn't eat. And if I asked a vampire to dinner, it would be like dinner on myself.
See, my immediate like go-to would be, hey, here's like some lamb's blood, or like like I would find some liquid blood. I wouldn't think, well, I gotta cook him dinner now because he says, oh, I'm omnivorous. But like, I would just go pick up some blood.
Exactly. Or like, you can buy parts of animals. I don't really eat a lot of meat, but like you can buy like a half a cow or something. And from farmers, from butchers, I guess. I don't know.
I want to lay half the cow on his plate and say,
no,
like, break out your fangs and suck on this. Like,
well, yeah, you could. But I was thinking more get the blood out of it yourself and then give it to him.
Oh, okay.
But also, either works, you know. But yeah, definitely interesting choice.
Well, we're gonna find out next time what she makes for him, whether it's half a cow or not.
Some lamb's blood.
Lamb's blood. We'll see what she makes for him next time.
Well, that wraps it up for this week. If you want to get in touch with us and share your thoughts on anything you heard in our episode, or have any book suggestions, you can email us at coffeeandcoread@gmail.com. And be sure to check us out on Twitter and Instagram at Coffee and Co-Read. That's COFFEEANDCOREAD.
Next week, we'll be reading through chapters 12 to 23 of Discovery of Witches, so make sure to follow along. And if you're enjoying our little chats, don't forget to follow, rate, and review wherever you find content. Thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll see you on the next page.